Far off the coast of Africa lies an island that most people only know from cartoons and travel brochures. Madagascar, a land of unique wildlife, lush rainforests, and mysterious tribes. But beyond the beaches and the smiling tour guides, hidden deep in the heart of the island, is a secret so dark it's almost impossible to believe. Here, in this forgotten corner of the world, stands a prison unlike any other, a place where sunlight rarely reaches and hope doesn't exist. Locals whisper its name with fear. Foreign journalists are warned to stay away. Even the government avoids talking about it. It's a place that doesn't just punish, it breaks you. Welcome to Madagascar's Hell Prison. Built during the colonial era and left to rot with time, this prison wasn't designed to rehabilitate criminals. It was designed to erase them. It sits in the middle of dense, humid forest, a rusting fortress of concrete and iron surrounded by decaying walls and barbed wire. There's no modern technology, no surveillance system, no emergency medical care, just stone walls, rusted chains, and a silence broken only by screams in the night. Inside, more than 4,000 prisoners are packed into cells built for less than half that number. There's no clean water, barely enough food to keep a man alive, and no ventilation in the sweltering tropical heat. Disease spreads like wildfire. Tuberculosis, skin infections, dysentery, left untreated as prisoners lie on cracked concrete floors, begging for help that never comes. And here's the most terrifying part. Most of them haven't even been convicted. Over 60% of the inmates here are still awaiting trial. Some have been waiting for years, forgotten by the system, abandoned by their families, and left to rot in legal limbo. Innocent or guilty, it doesn't matter. Once you go in, there's no guarantee you'll ever come out. Eyewitnesses who've managed to step inside describe it as a scene from a horror movie. Rows of emaciated bodies packed into dark cells, their eyes hollow, their spirits broken. There are no beds, no toilets, just a single bucket shared by a dozen men. The stench is unbearable, the air thick with rot, blood, and disease. Guards rarely intervene. In fact, they're often part of the problem. Inmates speak of beatings with metal rods, electric shocks, and unspeakable punishments handed down without reason. In this prison, you don't just survive the sentence, you survive the people. The prison, though unnamed in most public records, has been unofficially dubbed Hell's Cellar by human rights activists. The United Nations has raised concerns. International watchdogs have issued reports, but nothing has changed. Why? Because this prison exists in the shadows, far from the capital, hidden from cameras, and wrapped in layers of silence, corruption, and fear. It's part of a justice system overwhelmed by poverty, underfunded courts, and outdated colonial laws. And to the officials in power, it's easier to ignore the problem than to fix it. And so, the suffering continues. In a world of smartphones and satellite news, how is it that a place like this can still exist? How can so many lives be crushed and discarded without anyone watching? The answer is simple. No one wants to look. But in this series, we will look. We'll dive into the hidden corners of Madagascar's most dangerous prison. We'll hear stories from survivors, explore the brutal conditions, and uncover the horrifying secrets locked behind those walls. This isn't just a story about a prison. It's a story about how far human cruelty can go when no one is watching. It's a story about silence, fear, and the price of being forgotten. Welcome to hell. Let's step inside.
Step inside the rusted gates, and you're hit by a wave of filth and heat so intense it steals the air from your lungs. The walls sweat with mold. The floor, slippery with blood, waste, and dirty water, tells a story of suffering. This is not a prison built for rehabilitation, or even punishment. This is a death sentence disguised as detention. Here, men don't live. They rot. Madagascar's Hell Prison is infamous for its severe overcrowding. A single cell built for 4 inmates often holds up to 20 men, crammed together like livestock. With no beds, Most lie directly on the cracked cement floor, their bones bruised from days, weeks, months of lying still, too weak to move, too scared to sleep. The heat is unrelenting. Temperatures inside the prison walls can reach over 40 degrees Celsius, 104 degrees Fahrenheit. There is no ventilation, just stagnant, humid air thick with sweat, infection, and death. Many prisoners strip naked just to survive the oppressive heat, but even that brings no relief. The humidity seeps into their lungs, growing mold in every corner, spreading disease like wildfire. And then there's the food, if you can even call it that. Each prisoner is allotted one meal a day, often nothing more than a handful of rice, some moldy cassava, or a watery broth made from discarded vegetables. There is no meat, no protein, and definitely no nutrition. Malnutrition is rampant. Ribs poke through skin. Eyes sink into hollow skulls. Inmates are so weak they can't even stand when called for inspection. Those who do manage to fight for extra rations often pay the price. Corruption runs deep. Guards sell food to prisoners who can pay, creating a brutal hierarchy where the rich survive and the poor starve. Money buys food, medicine, even protection. Without it, you're prey. But hunger is only one of the killers here. Disease is the prison's silent executioner. With no proper sanitation, no toilets, and only a few broken taps for thousands of inmates, hygiene is non-existent. Skin infections go untreated. Rats and roaches crawl freely across sleeping bodies. Diseases like tuberculosis, cholera, dysentery, and scabies are daily realities. The sick lie side by side with the dying, and the stench of rotting flesh clings to the air like a curse. Medical care? It's a fantasy. There's no in-house doctor, no emergency treatment. If an inmate gets sick, they must wait weeks or months for help. Often, help never comes. One prisoner was reportedly left with a festering wound for 3 months, until maggots began eating away at his flesh. Another died from a simple respiratory infection, something a single dose of antibiotics could have cured. But medicine is not given freely here. Like food, it must be bought, and most prisoners have no money, no family support, and no voice. Even worse, mental illness is rampant, but completely ignored. Inmates with schizophrenia, depression, and severe trauma are simply thrown in with the general population. There is no counseling, no separation, no understanding. Some scream through the night. Others hurt themselves or the ones around them. The prison becomes a pressure cooker of madness and violence. And then comes the violence. Fights break out daily, sometimes over food, sometimes over space, and often over nothing at all. With no guards inside the overcrowded cells, prisoners rule themselves, and survival means choosing sides. Makeshift gangs form. Strong inmates control the weak. Brutal punishments are dished out in secret. If you complain, you disappear. Some inmates speak of a dark room, a punishment cell where the worst abuse takes place. Stripped, shackled, and starved, inmates are left there for days without light, food, or water. The screams echo down the halls, but no one comes. No one cares. Outside, the world continues. Tourists visit Madagascar's national parks. Politicians make speeches. But inside these walls, men are dying slowly, forgotten by time, consumed by a system that never cared whether they were innocent or guilty. This isn't just the story of a brutal prison. This is a graveyard of the living, a place where suffering becomes normal, where silence is survival, and where each passing day feels worse than death itself. Next, we'll take you deeper, into the secrets hidden behind these walls, stories of torture, corruption, and the horrifying truth that few dare to speak. If the rotting food, disease, and suffocating heat weren't enough to break a man, then what lies behind the inner walls of Madagascar's hell prison will. This is where the real horror begins, the part of the prison few talk about, and even fewer survive to tell. Because behind the overcrowded cells and unspeakable living conditions lies something far worse, a system of terror, corruption, and brutality that operates in the shadows. This is not just a prison. It is a carefully hidden machine of slow, systematic destruction. The guards don't just patrol the prison, they run it, and not like protectors of order, but like warlords. Bribery and extortion are the prison's lifeline. Need medicine? Pay up. Want protection? Pay more. Need to avoid a beating? That'll cost you too. Those with outside connections or family support can buy their way into slightly better treatment. They might receive more food, a less crowded cell, or even temporary immunity from torture. But for those without money, the prison becomes a living nightmare. Testimonies from former inmates describe horrific punishment chambers, dark, unlit rooms with no windows or toilets, where prisoners are tossed without food or water for days. Inmates are shackled to the floor, forced to lie in their own waste. Some are beaten with sticks wrapped in cloth soaked in salt water, designed to sting and scar without leaving bruises that outside observers could report. And these aren't just stories. They've been documented, whispered by survivors who have fled the country, confessed to journalists in hushed voices, or written in secret letters smuggled out through sympathetic guards. One former prisoner recalled a punishment called the drowning game, where inmates were dragged to a corner of the prison, forced to stand with a water bucket over their head, and repeatedly dunked until they lost consciousness. It was never recorded, never seen, but those who survived it carried the trauma in their eyes forever. Another rumor, one that still sparks fear, is about the silent wing, a part of the prison that's off limits even to most guards. It's said to house the most dangerous or politically sensitive prisoners, men who were once whistleblowers, activists, or wrongly arrested rebels. In that section, no names are spoken, no noise is heard. Some inmates sent there are never seen again. Even worse are the allegations of organ trafficking. Human rights groups have hinted that in certain rare cases, inmates who suddenly died were buried without proper documentation or autopsy. In at least 2 known cases, bodies returned to families in sealed coffins, with strict instructions not to open them. Locals claim some prisoners were declared dead, only to vanish. And while there is no official proof, the whispers persist, fueled by decades of silence, secrecy, and fear. The prison is protected by a shield of corrupt bureaucracy. Officials pretend the worst isn't happening. When inspectors do visit, they're only shown a cleaned-up block of cells prepared days in advance. Inmates are threatened into silence, bribed with promises of food if they smile for the camera or say the right thing. But not all secrets stay buried. A few brave individuals, former inmates, ex-guards, and even international aid workers, have spoken out. Their stories have surfaced in obscure reports, buried in NGO websites and underground documentaries. Most were ignored, some mysteriously disappeared, but together their accounts paint a picture too horrifying to deny. So why hasn't the world done anything? Because Madagascar is poor, because the prison isn't in a tourist city, because its inmates are mostly forgotten, people without names, faces, or lawyers. To the outside world, they don't matter. And that silence is exactly what keeps the horror going. This prison operates like a shadow kingdom, a hidden world where pain is currency, silence is survival, and the walls aren't just made of concrete, but of fear, secrecy, and indifference. And the worst part? No one is counting the bodies, no one is tracking the truth, and no one is listening, until now. In the next chapter, we'll share the true survival stories of those who escaped this hell, the rare voices of prisoners who live to tell the tale, and the scars they carry forever. Most men who enter Madagascar's hell prison never come out. Some die quietly from disease, others vanish in silence, buried in unmarked graves or forgotten in the system. But a few, just a few, make it out alive, not whole, not unscarred, but breathing. Their stories are rare, raw, and heartbreaking, testimonies of human endurance in a place designed to crush the soul. One such survivor is Jean-Luc Randrian, a 34-year-old mechanic from Toamasina. He was arrested for allegedly stealing a motorcycle, a charge he denies to this day. With no money to pay for a lawyer and no family support, he was thrown into pre-trial detention and left in prison for over 7 years. He never saw a judge. He never had a trial. His file, like hundreds of others, was lost in the system. Jean-Luc described his first day inside as the moment he knew he'd been buried alive. He was placed in a cell meant for 6 men, but shared it with 28. The smell, he said, burned your throat. The walls leaked. The floor was sticky with human waste. His only bedding was a plastic rice sack he'd pulled from the trash. But the worst wasn't the hunger, or the thirst, or even the disease. It was the fear. Every night I thought I would die, Jean-Luc said, not because of illness, but because of someone's rage, someone's scream, someone's fist. In his 3rd year, Jean-Luc caught tuberculosis. He begged for help, but the guards only laughed. He was left in a corner to cough blood into a torn shirt, surrounded by other dying men. One night, a prison medic walked past his cell. Jean-Luc called out, and the man, moved by something rare, gave him a small packet of pills. That act of mercy saved his life. Years later, after foreign aid groups began investigating pre-trial abuse, Jean-Luc's case came to light. A lawyer took interest, fought through red tape, and secured his release. He walked out of the gates with no belongings, no compensation, and no apology. But he was free. Now, he works with an NGO, helping other wrongfully imprisoned men. But he doesn't smile much. He doesn't sleep well. You can leave the prison, he says, but it never leaves you. Another survivor, a woman known only as Ina, was imprisoned for defending herself against her abusive husband. After being arrested without proper legal process, she was sent to the women's wing, a section just as horrifying, yet almost invisible to the world. Women, especially those accused of moral or domestic crimes, are treated with brutal disregard. Ina was beaten upon arrival. She was denied sanitary supplies. Pregnant inmates gave birth on the cell floor, using rags soaked in filthy water. Ina witnessed the death of a fellow inmate, a young girl imprisoned for stealing bread. The girl collapsed after days without food and water. She was never seen by a doctor. Her body was removed at night, without ceremony, without name. Ina survived by keeping her head down and cleaning for the guards. In return, they gave her scraps of food. She served 4 years before being released due to international pressure on her case. She now lives in hiding, traumatized, but determined to speak out. Her voice joins the few others, whispers in a storm of silence. One of the most haunting stories came from a former prison guard who eventually fled the country. He confessed to seeing at least 15 unexplained deaths in 1 year, none of which were officially documented. He described the list, a secret roster of prisoners marked for punishment. These were inmates who asked too many questions, who tried to organize, or who simply refused to pay bribes. These men never made it to court, he said. They were lost in the dark. These survivors don't tell their stories for sympathy. They tell them so the world knows. They speak for the thousands still trapped inside, waiting, suffering, fading away. Because the truth is simple. No one should suffer like this. Not the innocent, not the guilty, not anyone. And yet, as you read these words, someone is dying in Madagascar's hell prison. Right now, in a dark corner, alone. In the next section, we uncover the final layer of this nightmare, why the world does nothing, and how this horror continues unchecked.
The horror inside Madagascar's hell prison is not a secret. It's not hidden underground. It's not protected by some invisible force field. It is known, documented, witnessed. And yet, nothing changes. Because the final, most disturbing truth is this: the world knows and chooses to look away. For years, international human rights organizations like Amnesty International, Human Rights Watch, and the United Nations have raised alarm bells about Madagascar's prison system. Reports have been published. Photographs have surfaced. Survivor testimonies have been collected. And still, the gates remain closed. The cells remain packed. And the screams continue in the dark. Why? Because Madagascar is a poor country, burdened by debt, political instability, and widespread corruption. It ranks among the world's poorest nations, with a justice system stretched to its limits and a government often more concerned with maintaining control than enforcing rights. The country receives millions of dollars in international aid, but very little of it ever reaches the justice or prison system. Most goes to healthcare, infrastructure, or climate programs. And whatever funds do reach the correctional system are often siphoned off by corrupt officials or misused in superficial upgrades meant to impress foreign visitors, a fresh coat of paint on a decaying tomb. Occasionally, journalists are allowed to visit selected prisons, but only the clean blocks. Guards are instructed in advance. Inmates are warned to behave. The horror is staged out of sight. Foreign news crews film what they're allowed to see and then leave, unaware or unable to prove what really happens just one hallway away. And the few who try to dig deeper? They face pressure, visa rejections, surveillance, even threats. One French journalist who attempted to expose Madagascar's prison abuses in 2019 reported that her sources began disappearing. 2 former inmates she interviewed were rearrested. A local activist who helped her was allegedly harassed by plainclothes officers. The message was clear: stay quiet or disappear. International courts and watchdogs have no real power over the internal systems of a sovereign country like Madagascar. The most they can do is issue warnings, publish reports, or suspend funding. But without political will inside the country, change is almost impossible. And here's the most heartbreaking part. The suffering is cheap. There are no oil fields here, no major wars, no high-value geopolitical interests, just thousands of poor, voiceless prisoners locked away from the world. They don't make headlines. They don't spark protests. They're invisible to the global machine. It's not just that the world ignores this nightmare. It's that the world has decided it's not worth fixing. Every now and then, a spotlight flickers on. Maybe a viral documentary clip, a celebrity tweet, or a disturbing leaked image. And for a moment, the world gasps. But by the next day it's gone, replaced by new news, new outrage, new distractions, and so the cycle continues. But there is hope. Faint, flickering, fragile, but real. Grassroots organizations, many led by former inmates, are beginning to make noise. Legal aid clinics are starting to challenge pre-trial detention laws. Small, independent journalists within Madagascar are risking everything to tell the truth. And survivors, like Jean-Luc and Ina, are speaking out louder than ever before. What they need isn't sympathy. They need attention, pressure, and accountability. They need the world to stop scrolling and start acting. They need you, the viewer, the reader, the listener, to care. Because every time a story is told, a light shines into the darkness. And even in hell, light is powerful. This has been a journey through one of the darkest corners of our world. A place built to destroy, maintained by silence, and ignored by nearly everyone. But now you know. The question is, what will you do with that knowledge? Even if you cannot storm the gates, even if you cannot free the prisoners, you can speak, you can share, you can remember. Because the worst kind of prison isn't built from stone. It's built from silence,